Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Health and Wellbeing Committee. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note the meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend the public meeting, you're deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed, and once you have left the building, the assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphone when speaking. Right. Do we have any substitutes this evening?
Chair, yes, we do have one substitute. That's Jenny Barnes. She's here for Richard Udall this evening.
And if we move straight on to agenda item 5, which is a presentation from Lisa Bedford. Okay.
Thank you very much. So first of all, I want to start by apologising for missing the last meeting. I had a child with COVID at the time and I didn't think I better leave the house. Although the other one has come home and told me her best friend's got COVID. So I'm hoping that's okay, but apologies that I missed the February meeting. So thank you for inviting me along. I'm Lisa Bedford. I'm Service Development Manager at Worcestershire County Council. I work in the Communities and Partnership team, which is part of the People's Directorate. So tonight what I'm going to do is give you kind of an overview of kind of where we've been here to help and then where we're going to go and some of the areas that it would be great to kind of have further conversations with you around as we go on. So I've got a few slides to go through. If it's all right with you, if we go through the slides and then take questions at the end, is that okay? And if there's any answers that I can't get, I will go away and get them for you because I am quite new. I've only been here since November, so I don't know some of the historical information, but I will absolutely get an answer for you. So thank you. Can I start with the first slide? There you go. So I brought my glasses so I can read my own slides. So you're all aware of what Here to Help is if you're members at the time or out in the community. As a resident in Worcestershire, I knew about Here to Help from my local newspaper. It was very well promoted at the time. So it was around communities coming together, supporting each other, working with councils around that really early response to the COVID pandemic. Obviously, we're now living with COVID as part of our day-to-day, so we're moving into that business as usual phase, and we're looking at how to we embed that practice, that really good practice that came during COVID in our day-to-day activity around that accessible information, early help, intervention, partnership working, and reconnecting back with our communities. Next slide, please. Thank you. Right, so I've just put, I'm going to have to get my own, I cannot read that, so I'm going to have to get my own version of that one out. So I've just put a couple of slides in here just to show you a bit of geographical data from the Here to Help team. So these numbers here are all of the requests for help that we've received up until the end of February. So what that means is all of the clinically vulnerable information that came directly through to us, the test and trace data and the self-referrals. So you'll see that up until the end of February, that's around 19,000 requests for help. Now, obviously, not all of those resulted in direct actual action, but we had to contact everybody to find out if it did. So you can imagine the volume of calls that have been going through that team since the COVID pandemic began. So you'll see from that breakdown, actually Worcester City did have the highest proportion, but only kind of slightly really there, over Wychavon there in numbers. And you can see there that kind of Malvern did have a quite significantly lower, although I think case rates were always lower in Malvern somehow, seemed to be kind of on the lower level than in other areas, weren't they? So that might account for that kind of difference in those numbers. So the types of support that we gave in there, so I mean, you'll all be aware of this. So food parcels, food vouchers, arranging volunteers to collect, shoppings, prescriptions, signposting to the Citizens' Advice, more recently the Household Support Fund, referrals into adult social care, referrals into district housing, things like that. So a massive range. If you went, I mean, the list would go on forever in terms of the type of support that our Here to Help team were giving over the phone, and then obviously in person we were able to arrange, facilitate, working very closely with districts and our other partners in that response time. Next slide, please. So again, I got somebody clever with spreadsheets to do me a board breakdown for you. I definitely didn't do this. So again, it's that kind of 19,000 number, and we've taken your extract out. So you'll see there Cathedral, Warndon and Nunnery with the highest wards in terms of the numbers that were coming through. That you will know this much better than I in terms of what's happened over the last 2 years. But just to show you there. Next slide, please.
Chair. I mean, that's interesting, but Cathedral comes out the top for nearly everything because it's the biggest ward by a very significant margin. So
By
in terms of a rate for the population is potentially
I can ask
more meaningful.
the question, yeah. Yeah, I'll see if I can get that. Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. So here we are, this is where we are now, and this is the transformation bit of Here to Help, really, which is how I say customers I don't really like, so our residents access our services and information, improving that journey for people, where they go to get support and the journey that they go on, how we can get it better first time, how we can reduce the number of steps that they need to make. And obviously, a really big part of this is people helping themselves to stay safe and well in their communities for as long as possible. Fundamentally, that's the prevention agenda. That's where we want to be. That's the ambition that we're working towards. Next slide, please. So these are the values that we're working to. And again, I think obviously I'm not going to read through all the bits underneath, but I mean the 5 headings there, I don't think anybody kind of could argue with those in terms of values. We want to empower, enable people, connecting people, supporting our communities, making it as accessible as we can make it, and maximising potential. And that's not just kind of individuals. I guess that's in terms of how we work together as partners, with our health partners, with our district partners, with our commission providers, how we maximise our potential as a unit across Worcestershire to support our residents in the best way that we can. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are our three pillars of delivery. So somebody's done some nice clip arts there off the and to put those pillars in there. So the digital, obviously, that's the online offer. So that is our Here to Help website. Well, I'll come on to that. I'll show you some images of that in a minute. The Community Services Directory is obviously a very new addition to that. So it's kind of in September last year. So it's the main information site plus the directory are our digital. But obviously as well, there is other ways in. So that kind of moves on into online referrals to adult social care and other services into the council and councils and providers as well. So that we have got 2 main elements, but that will grow because that's obviously an area that we need to build on. Telephone, that's our Here to Help service, and our adult social care front door, as we call it, the ACT team, where they take those first calls into adult social care in the council. And face-to-face, which obviously is an area that we will change and grow because there hasn't been a huge amount across all of our services. Face-to-face hasn't been a major part. It's been kind of as and when is needed, so the social care side of things. If we're talking about a more prevention, earlier intervention, that face-to-face is the area that will develop a lot over time to where we are now, because it isn't really there as a preventative, it's more of a responsive service currently. Next slide, please. So yeah, this is the front door. So this is how people kind of contact the council really for adult social care. So we do have a team of advisors that triage and make those referrals and signposting on. They're very skilled at what they do. They know the adult social care system and make sure people get to where they need to as quickly as possible. So they respond to requests through the website and through the calls received, and referrals in from other organisations. We've had lots of people that have been that have come through there. We've had good feedback on that, particularly the support during the COVID period. So you'll see that quote on there. I'm not going to go through it all, but it was somebody that was, I've got £6 in the bank. We've got COVID account. This is when we had to stay at home. You've saved me. It means we can eat. We can. So if you've got no family or friends around, you can just see what a difference that made very early on in the pandemic when people just didn't know where to go to for help. So we were able to do that. And as we've talked about before, 19,000 requests have come through. And what is equally as impressive as the number that we've had to deal with as kind of councils is that 3,000 offers of help came forward. That's from individuals volunteering, but also organisations offering help. So if we can go on the next slide, please. So here we go. Yes, this is a bit more detail around that. So nearly 2,500 expressions of interest in volunteering received, 707 of those from Worcester City, which is brilliant. Obviously, that's cumulative over the period. A lot of those people registered to volunteer when they were furloughed and things like that. So the situation has moved on considerably in terms of who is available and active. But as you'll see there, we've still got well over 400 that are registered and active. Obviously, clinic work has been a big chunk of what they've kind of been doing most recently. We have a volunteer coordinator that started, I think last August, David started in our team. And he is kind of doing some coordination, I think, from the council in the first, there's a lot of volunteering that happens in the council that kind of dots all over the place. So actually now we've got a volunteer coordinator, we can bring that together, look at those corporate approach to volunteering, the policies and practices around that, whilst also developing the future offer. So we've had inquiries from a range of organisations around, we need some volunteers, can you help us? So some of them are our commissioned providers, and obviously we've got a relationship there. Some of them are our internal colleagues, and as you can imagine, the refugee situation is an area that is absolutely on our agenda in terms of volunteering. So that there is a huge amount of work going on in that area. And as somebody that's worked in communities and community development for quite a long time, it's really nice to see now that things that have kind of didn't get the kind of, I suppose, coverage are now getting the coverage again. So communities, community groups, volunteering, it's getting a lot more prominence than it had done for the previous, 15 years, maybe more. So it's great that there is kind of investment and activity happening in this area. So I won't cover the bottom two, they're just some up-to-date numbers in there. The photo is one of our clinics, and you can see a little quote in there from people that are getting quite a lot from this experience. I think people who want to give something back, being involved in the clinics, it's logistically quite time consuming to get enough volunteers to manage. But actually, we've had some really good feedback, obviously from our health providers, but also from the volunteers, and we're looking to very much build and grow that. Next slide, please. Okay, so back to our kind of the pillars here now. So digital delivery. So that is a screenshot of our current page, although it will change because we'll take COVID stuff off and we'll have something else on there, and household support fund, unfortunately, and the Winters well will go in the next week or two because they're not relevant anymore. So you'll see there we've got a number of building blocks really of information. So we've got that how to register your services, how to request your help. So I'm just trying to, I can't read my own images here, it's too small, my glasses aren't strong enough. So it's the how to register for help and how to register your organisation there. Then we've got those thematic blocks which take you through to some council pages that already exist. So it's not all, we're not creating new, we're linking back to content that already exists, obviously maximising the investment that we've already got in there. So obviously we've got that kind of the money matters, the looking after someone, we've got mental wellbeing, recreation and activities, volunteering, work and learning. So there's a range of thematic areas that will change, I think, over time based on feedback that we're getting from people. Obviously, again, this is all still relatively new, so we will listen and we will adapt to make sure that we're meeting the needs as best that we can. Next slide, please. So this one is just a screenshot of directory entry, really. So this is one of the services that's registered on the directory. So the Community Services Directory, as I said, it was launched in September. We've got around 300 organisations registered. It's gone up since I wrote this now. I think it's 298. So again, as with directories, we've all seen directories before. They're quite time consuming to manage and run. So this one, as a number of other local authorities is self-management. It's not self-service, necessarily self-management. So the onus is on organisations putting their information on and managing that. They will get automated reminders from us if they haven't logged in for a while, just to check in and make sure everything's all right. But it's very much the organisation inputs their information. Luckily, we've managed to appoint a development officer that started with us today that's actually going to be able to focus on the directory and making sure that we're really kind of getting the message out there, supporting organisations to register and growing that base of 300 across the county. So as you'll see there, we've got 6% located in Worcester City, the majority of county-wide services that are currently on there. We have got an app in development as well, which I've seen an early version of, which will be good for people who are good on apps and smartphones and things like that. So that's in progress. It is built in-house, so we can kind of do things quite quickly, really, because we've got the team in-house that's built it. So we can be quite responsive on that front. There is an option to give feedback on it just because you can't find what you're looking for. So that's really important. So if you can't find it, tell us, and then we'll go away and have a look and then make sure that we're kind of covering any gaps. As I've said, very early stages with the directory, but now we've got some resource in place. We want to kind of work as closely as we can with partners, and in some cases see if there is an opportunity to join databases together, whether or not there's clever technical ways. Don't ask me anything about the technology. This definitely not my bag, to actually see if we can not duplicate, because I'm aware that some authorities, organisations, CABs have directories. There's lots of directories out there. So how can we make the best use of the directories provision across the county and join up as best we can? Next slide, please. So this one here, I won't don't need to dwell on this one. So that's just the first page of how you register, really. I've had a look and a go. It's relatively self-explanatory to fill in if you're computer literate. And having done this in other authorities, I have sat with people to get them on. So I can't remember what group it was. I think it might have been like a carer support group or something, who weren't really IT literate. So they had an email address, and that's really all you need. So I sat with them and kind of worked them through. So if you're IT literate, it's fine. If you're not, we need to be able to provide you support to make sure that your organisation is on there should you wish to be registered on there. Next slide, please. So this is the face-to-face kind of community offer end, really. So this is the bit that hasn't happened yet. So this is the work that we do need to develop, and it's very much around working in partnership. So it's how we engage with people, how we support people out in the community, how we work with our partners, voluntary sector, statutory partners, and again, around that real kind of coordinated approach to early intervention and support prevention. So these are just some principles. These aren't set in stone. It hasn't developed to that stage yet. So we obviously have assets in terms of libraries, and we have staff in libraries across the county. So we have a county-wide network of a face-to-face offer that exists already. How can we make the most of that? And our library services are fantastic at wanting to do that. They're really kind of progressive in terms of, yes, we can do this, but we might need a bit of help around here to do that. So that's obviously an area. But obviously there are a number of other community organisations that are out there as a kind of a front door for people in their community. So how do we work with those partners? How do we shape that collectively? Because we don't want to go out and go, here's our community offer, join with us. We want to shape it with people. We don't want to do that in isolation. So they're just some key principles. So it's community-based, it's signposting support, it's how do people engage, where do they engage, what makes sense for people in communities, because as we know, communities there are certain buildings that people don't go to, won't go to. There are certain buildings that they will. How are we going to really kind of reach our residents and make sure that they're confident to kind of go there and access the support that they need? And yeah, that connecting people with their communities is, as we know through COVID, has been a real, one of the plus sides is that kind of linking people back to their communities. And obviously we want to carry on and embed that for as long as we can. Next slide, please. So these are just kind of some areas that are potentials for us to work together. So obviously, have a look. I think we're really keen to hear your feedback. So have a look at the pages, have a look at the directory. Let us know if there's any feedback, anything you think this doesn't work correctly, or you could improve it by putting this on there. This content seems to be missing. We're always looking for feedback from people, because the teams that have been working on it have been so head down in it. It's really great when other people look at it. So I've come in as a new person, probably annoyed them a lot, because I've gone, haven't you done this? Have you not looked at that? So it's really important that we get that feedback from people. Obviously, if you can, and it's a conversation we need to have about your own directories and how that works. How do we encourage people to sign up to it? Is there a way in which we can work with your own information directories? How does that work? Do we need to have further conversations around that? If there's any events that you've got going on where you think it'd be useful for here to help to come along and give an overview of what's happening, then let us know. And again, it's that partnership approach to developing the directory and that community offer that would be fantastic if we could do some joint work around that. I'm going to stop talking now.
Thank you very much. Before I open it up to questions, Ditta, could you possibly turn that light out? It's shining right in my eyes. Yeah, it's shining right in my eyes. No, that's even worse. Any questions from anybody? Lucy?
Just so you know, up until the election, I was the cabinet member at the county and for communities, and it was such an amazing thing that Here to Help, it really gave everybody within the local community a chance to actually access things and that sort of thing. And I just wonder whether or not you are able to access all the things about Act Local and that sort of thing, which the county used to have with volunteering and that sort of thing. And really about how do people access without, so those that aren't computer literate and that sort of thing, and really perhaps not always accessing the computers, whatever. I know the libraries and goodness knows what are all instructed about accessing the services and that sort of thing, which I think is a brilliant idea. And certainly at Worcester City, we've got St John's Library and Wandon Library, which we actually contribute some money to. So hopefully we can almost pave the way for that sort of thing. But certainly it's brilliant, but I would like to know about face-to-face and that sort of thing.
Yeah, so that face-to-face offer is the one that is still in development, because obviously it's harder to do. So to develop a face-to-face offer across the county is going to be quite a big undertaking, and probably something that we will have to do in phases, because I think it would be difficult for us to create a solution overnight. And as I say, with that, it's around how we work with our partners, where people are going to access support. So, for example, we have social prescribers across the county who quite often will be a first port of call for the GPs will be the first port of call for a non-medical issue, but that's manifesting itself in a potentially kind of medical way. So how do we enable those types of staff to support people to get the help that they need to? So it's about us linking in with the right people, the right touch points out in the community. Libraries you've touched on, I touched on that. Libraries are a place that some people are very comfortable in going into, but again, not everybody. So how do we come up with that solution? And this is where we need local intelligence. You know your communities, you know the places that people are happy to go to and the places that they're not. So what then do we build behind it in terms of peer support or training or whatever it might be to enable people to do a little bit more than what they do already? I think just a bit more knowledge, a bit more. It might be a direct route into the Here to Help team. It might be an ability to have an advisor that's on the end of the phone for Here to Help organisations that are kind of linked in its development. I don't have the answers to that, but we're acutely aware that we need to come up with solutions that are right for our communities, and it's not a one size fits all.
Good luck.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
Karen?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I was noting, you mentioned COVID. I wouldn't be taking that down just yet, I don't think, because we've got several. I know more people that got it now this last 2 weeks than at any point. And the other thing, you mentioned the household support fund. Will there be a move towards a more general energy bill? Because a lot of people are anxious about their energy bills. So maybe are you replacing it with that?
So that yes, COVID will still be on there, but it won't be at the top. So there'll be a reshuffling of that page. So that COVID banner has been there for a long time, and I think people are probably not reading it because it's been there forever. Yeah. So there will be a restructuring of that page. Household support fund. So currently we have no information about April. So we've had a meeting today, haven't we, Warwick? So as a group of the County Council with the districts, we meet regularly to kind of chat that through. We're going to come together again in April to see are there any things that we can do collectively around this. So there isn't any more money. All that money is gone. Obviously, it would be fantastic if there were more money coming down the line, and if there is, then we will. There was a lot of learning from this household support fund that we can build into anything else that comes forward. There will be waiting lists because we won't be able to meet everybody's needs that have come forward during this period. But yeah, we're squeezing. We're any underspends everywhere are going into that energy fund.
Not necessarily actually financially supporting, but just even advice, because as ward councillors, I find it difficult to sort of tap into. You know, if someone's got a problem, where do I turn to for that? Which is why I'm quite
yes. So we have picked up on that as well, haven't we, Warwick? So I've spoken to our sustainability team in the council, and we've spoken to Act on Energy to whether or not we can develop whether it's online training or in-person training for people who are frontline. That would be councillors, that would be frontline workers, call takers. I've had one half-an-hour conversation about it. I've got another meeting this week, I think. So it is something that we're looking to take forward to help everybody that's going to be tackling this on a regular basis. So once we develop that, it will absolutely go around to anybody that's interested in doing that.
The last thing we want is someone to reach out to us and us to not know where to turn. But I've been contacted by some people who are organising a good neighbourhood network. It's something to do with age concern and Worcester communities. Do you know that?
Tiny bit. So that's a public health funded contract that is relatively new. I think it was only autumn last year. Yeah. So I think there's not that much longer left to go on it because it was COVID recovery monies. Absolutely. Any of our commissioned partners would be part of that in terms of getting that message out there to help anybody. So I always kind of go back to Good Neighbour schemes are one of my classic ones. So community transport drivers and Good Neighbour schemes are people who are out there in communities seeing things and not necessarily knowing where to get people to. So if more opportunities we can get to give them so just signpost to here. Yeah. So it might be actually speak to Act on Energy, they just tell everybody to contact us and they don't have any general money, but they've got other schemes that people might be able to tap into around, particularly around kind of the renewable technologies and things like that. They've got a number of kind of schemes. So yeah, we are acutely aware, and we'll develop that over the coming weeks.
Thank you very much.
It might be worth you looking at the presentation that was given to the Environment Committee last week from Act on Energy. That might answer some of your questions as well. Have Lynn and then Jenny.
Thank you. I mean, it's interesting to see how this is being evolved. I mean, you know, the original COVID was, you know, everybody was locked down and there was an urgent need. People had urgent, very practical needs, and people were sort of volunteering. And whether that's a naive thing, it was a kind of one-to-one, you know, linking of people together. I think, yes, I mean, thank you for describing. To evolve it into something quite different, almost is going to need some remarketing and a re-understanding. I mean, it's good that you're talking to Warwick. I do have concern that there are several organisations developing directories. So, you know, the City Council's got Find It, Do It. I think the CCG mapping, part of them are mapping dementia services. Redeeming Our Communities are also talking about mapping stuff and finding out what you're doing. And then there's the Worcester Volunteer Bureau, who are also trying to map stuff. I did direct them to. It can, I suppose I'm looking for some reassurance that we aren't spending huge amounts of resources in mapping things and a bit more resource into, should we have a bit more resource into doing things? If I can kind of pose that first, and I've got kind of some other follow-ups, please.
So I think, I know that there is a lot of mapping happening currently, and from my point of view, I want to get to that mapping and encourage them to kind of, how can we work together on it? Because through the development of the collaboratives, through the CCG and the integrated care system, mapping is all anybody seems to talk about currently. So we are acutely aware of that, and we do need to do as much as we can to try and reduce the duplication. I don't have an answer to the directories question. It's one that's, I mean, I've worked in directories in a couple of other local authorities. It's really hard work, directories, because you just, getting people to give up their directory or work in partnership it can be quite tricky. There are some that where you've got the technology, you can just merge them together and have two interfaces in, which is ideal then, because whichever route somebody comes into it, obviously you have to have all the data protection and all the stuff that I don't kind of know the detail of. But we are very aware of those challenges, and we are doing everything we can to minimise, the resource that's being expended around that. But obviously, I don't have a magic solution for that particular challenge, but we're working hard on it.
Oh, there we go. So on a Worcester district level, Worcester Find It, Do It, or Find It, Do It Worcester was generated a few years ago now, and I think in that vacuum, a lot of the health and wellbeing services were posted on that portal, even though its initial aim and objective was really local clubs and societies and venues, so people can map what's missing and actually create what's missing, or get together as friends. But then it almost sort of perversely rolled into this health and wellbeing, because, as I say, there was a vacuum around it. And since the creation of this particular directory has meant that we can roll back to what our original premise was with Find It, Do It. So I think the two directories for Worcester work side by side quite nicely. And in the absence of being able to create, as you say, this sort of engineered digital solution potentially could then dovetail into each other once we've got the technology right in future. So that's on that sort of side of things. As you know, our community engagement officers are funded by the County Public Health around the asset mapping for asset-based community development. Slightly different asset mapping to some of the other activity that's gone on. But the the Age UK project, it's not Volunteers of Worcester, it's Worcester Community Action who are doing the asset mapping. So we've endeavoured to make sure everyone's working with each other rather than in isolation. So that we're not overlapping or duplicating work.
I'll just come back in on that one. So as part of the ABCD contracts, Here to Help is mentioned in that contract to try and again encourage that linking in back to the council service.
Sorry, my colleague wants a pen. Sorry, I've lost my train of thought. I think one of the difficulties with the directories is the sort of continual movement of commissioning and recommissioning and decommissioning services. I think, in the time that I've become a councillor, things that were just the council are now in several different directions, and they're in that direction for 3 years and then it goes somewhere else, and that becomes a real challenge for everybody to map their way around, and even if you're sort of relatively intimately involved in it. So Joe Public, who's actually the person in need, finds it really, really difficult because you don't have the sort of longer term relationships of service.
Yeah, I think it's a point that local authorities, I was a commissioner in Herefordshire before I came over here, so yeah, I was very aware of those particular challenges and the communication around that. I think if we get our information, our directory right and our signposting right, then the kind of logistics that sit behind it hopefully are less of a concern to the public, because it's around people know where to go to access X and Y, and it might not be the same person delivering X and Y, because unfortunately we are bound by the procurement rules that we have to go through. Length of contracts as well is varies depending on where you go. Sometimes you can have a 10-year contract, sometimes you can have a 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, which is just, so I do take your points, but yeah, every local authority operates slightly differently on that kind of commissioning front. But there is something that obviously we are keen to look at, is how we work with the voluntary community sector, and as part of Here to Help, obviously commissioning services to the voluntary community sector will form part of that as we go forward. We haven't started that piece of work yet, but on our Here to Help it's community action, it's based on communities. We can't ignore that there are services delivered by the voluntary and community sector that obviously we want to work with and embed in our Here to Help approach as well.
Sorry, final question about volunteers. And I don't know, originally at the beginning of COVID and as Here to Help was launched, whether there was screening of volunteers. Certainly, in the current times, talking about people wanting to volunteer around the Ukrainian crisis, of safeguarding issues and screening volunteers. Is there a process for individuals who go to Here to Help saying, I want to help? What was it or what is it currently?
I would be lying if I said I knew the answer to that. There's definitely a process. So we do DBS checks where relevant. I don't think it's universal that everybody does one at point of registering their interest. I don't think everybody then goes and has one immediately. It comes later down the process. I will go in and find out the answer to that one, because I don't have that knowledge, I'm afraid.
Sorry, again, through you, Chair. So, yeah, quite right. Everyone that volunteered would have put down what jobs that they're interested in volunteering for. And so those that requiring DBS checks were done as part of that vetting process. then each job and its job role was obviously had a person spec, those sorts of things. So as people were brought on board, they were shadowed, worked with, that sort of thing, to obviously make sure they were appropriate for the role. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Chair. Really going on from there, obviously in the recent past we've had Syrian refugees come to the city, and now there's a very strong likelihood we will get Ukrainian refugees coming to the city. What are you putting in place for that group of new citizens?
Very good question. There was a meeting this afternoon that Lloyd went to that I unfortunately wasn't able to make. So I've got a meeting at 8:30 tomorrow to find out. So I can't give you the details. Lloyd might be able to give a bit more information on that one.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to say at the end of this item, we will brief all members in writing in the coming days about what we are doing in conjunction with public agencies across the county to support Ukrainian families and individuals who seek to come into the UK. Tomorrow there'll be some public comms around the Here to Help portal, which will be the sort of the key receiver of any offers of support. And when I say support, I don't mean support for accommodation. There's obviously there are existing routes for that through the government's visa scheme. But for instance, we had one lady today who contacted us on behalf of a couple of schools who wanted to make an offer that when Ukrainian families, individuals come along, if there were youngsters involved, they wanted to put on some sport for them. So Here to Help will become the portal for those offers of support, like it was for COVID. There's lots of other bits of work going on to make sure that anybody coming into the UK has a good welcome. It's probably a bit too much to go through this evening, but like I say, in the next couple of days there will be an email that will be sent to all City Council members that will update them on the scheme.
Thank you for that. That's really useful, because I was approached by a head teacher today who took in a Syrian refugee child, and this person had been quite badly shrapnel wounded and obviously needed extra help. He wonders what support the county council or government are going to offer schools in Worcester to support refugees, because obviously they will come probably with very little English or no English, and they will need to have a lot of extra support, that more than is normally needed. So I'd be interested to see what the county council are doing in that regard and how we can maybe support our schools. I understand that during the Syrian situation, which obviously is still ongoing to some degree, only one secondary school in Worcester actually was prepared to take on children. And I think that's something that maybe governing bodies might want to look at. And I know that the county council no longer has as much clout as it did, but I think we all need to see if we can do something a bit more and encourage our schools, whether secondary or primary, to do that bit more, especially as there'll be likely to be a lot more young people coming into the country and coming into Worcester.
So on that one, there is information from the government around the support that local councils will get for individual families, or actually individuals that are coming, and there's an amount of money, and that covers education, health and things like that. So I don't have the figures off the top of my head, but on the Home Office website, in the guidance for council section around the Ukraine crisis, it breaks down exactly what the money is and what the expectation is around that. Like I say, I can't quote all of that to you. I haven't quite got it embedded in there, but there will be a lot more kind of conversations to come around that. We are really just at this. I mean, hopefully Lloyd will be more advanced than I'm in these conversations. We're really at the start of that Ukraine response, and more information and more conversations will need to be had as we get to understand how many people are likely to come to Worcestershire, what that support might need to look like, the geographical locations of the offers of accommodation, because again, with previous schemes, I did a little bit of this in Herefordshire, they would tend to be grouped together in a particular geographical area. So obviously then you can have a community venue and you can have kind of welcome events and things like that. This is a completely different scheme to anything that we've seen before. So the response we won't be able to replicate things that have happened previously. So it's very much a developing situation in terms of what the response looks like across the county. So I don't have the answer to that, unfortunately.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Thank you so much for coming and presenting on this. I have to confess, I thought Here to Help was purely COVID related. I hadn't quite realised how much it had kind of evolved since then. And it's really useful to hear the information about the refugee assistance because, as I was just saying to Lloyd, we have a family coming to live with us. So it's very useful to know that there actually will be some support from the county, which is, you know, great. But yeah, thank you so much for coming down and presenting, and it was a really good report, so thank you.
Thank you. I haven't done this for so long. I said I was out of practice. I haven't done an
couldn't
in-person council
You were an absolute
meeting.
natural.
And last night I was having anxiety about it, but it's fine. Thank you very much for getting me back into the swing of council meetings. It was lovely to
so
meet you all. I'm going to shoot off if that's okay.
Of course.
Lovely.
Feel free to leave.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll move on to agenda item 6, which is the extension to the Access Able contract.
Thank you, Chair. So we've previously spoken about Access Able at committee, and there has been a contract in place which was previously known as Disabled Go, and then rebranded as Access Able. This is an online software where people can access information about various venues and as guides, they're called, on the website. And the guide will really give them the key information they need to be able to plan a journey to a particular venue or location, which means that the power is in the individual to understand what they need and what's in place in order to make that journey. The City Council had a contract with Access Able, which has come to an end this calendar year. There are currently more than 300 separate access guides published on the website, and one of which includes the Victorian Fair, which is unique to this particular type of guide, but they've found the number of hits and visits to that particular guide particularly interesting and impressive. So once you have the contract with Access Able, they will obviously carry out the initial survey of each of the venues that are registered, as they create these guides for multiple needs, so that everyone can access and benefit from them. And then once they're up and running and in place, they'll review those over the period of the contract, to make sure the information is up to date, and because that's obviously really important. Since the access guides were created, they've had 7,092 users. Correct myself. In 2021, they've had 7,092 individual users, and these users have viewed 26,000 pages relating to Worcester City access guides in the period. The most commonly visited guides were Shop Mobility Worcester, Crown Gate Bus Station, the Odeon Worcester, Sixways Stadium, and Worcester Crematorium. The benefit of using Access Able is that we're not the only people that have contracts with them. Both the University of Worcester and Worcestershire Acute Hospital have them. Therefore, you get that added benefit that the regional that you get more guides in one particular area, that not just your venues that you're paying for. So you've got that whole sort of benefit of multiple partners being on the same platform. At present, only 4% of access guides users find the information through council or partner websites. Most of them, probably because of Google, would Google access guides and go straight to Access Able, or know that Access Able was there already and go directly there. So there's an element of improvement of what we're doing in order to be able to guide people to the information that's available. And from conversations and other partnership work, there are other opportunities to make the Access Able, or the Access Able software itself complements other activities that the City Council is interested in delivering with partners, such as Purple Flag this year, as this is all about enabling people to enjoy the city, not just during the day, but into the early evening. The City Council obviously is also investing quite considerably in the Riverside, the Arches project, the Scala Theatre and Angel Place. So there are great opportunities in the near future to expand the offer that is on the web portal itself too. So let's just refer back to the recommendations, which recognise that Worcester is in flux and change. So we are suggesting extending the contract on the existing basis for 1 year, and then work with Access Able, Worcester Beard and partners to look at how we can expand on the existing number of guides and location of guides and routes for a potential further investment to bring back to community. Bring back to your committee for consideration. Any questions?
Thank you. Robin.
Thank you, Chair. How do participating venues become participating venues?
So when this was initially commissioned, there was a piece of work going out and identifying who wanted to have their venue surveyed. Because obviously it was quite an intensive process. And so that was the original contract, and then working with the Beard and partners that people can register going forwards on a year-by-year basis, because as you can imagine, over the last couple of years there's been quite a churn, so we have lost some venues, so we've got capacity to add more to a certain threshold at the moment with the existing contract.
So have we limited the count to 300 participating venues, or is that as part of the contract, or is that just what we felt was a natural limit for Worcester?
To be honest, I wasn't part of the original commissioning contract, so I don't know. Apologies, but I suppose there's also been council churn in the time since we initialed the contract. But certainly we can look at that.
Stephen.
Yeah, so my question is actually quite straightforward, really. Because it's actually, we're asking for a relatively small amount of money for this, and I take it reading 2.2 when with the current set budget of £25,000 and obviously £6,000 per year. Obviously, if we didn't renew this, we effectively wouldn't get the value of that £25,000. Whereas if we renew it now, we'll keep getting. We don't have to pay that £25,000 again, so we're simply paying £6,000. So basically, every year we renew this, we are actually getting the benefit of the 25,000 more and more.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, the initial 25,000 was setting up the software and the platform and all the guides, and the 6,000 per year as a maintenance cost. Yeah.
Thank you. It's not really a question, it's more of a comment that the Town Investment Fund, as Warwick said, is putting forward lots of money to make this a city where we're welcoming people to it. Heritage, the Riverside, as was mentioned. I think the bottom line to this is really we would be wrong not to, because it's got to be an inclusive situation. I think it's as simple as that. Thank you.
I'm glad you've mentioned the bid, and I would certainly like to see that every new establishment within the bid's remit actually can actually contribute to this. And if you'd like, as I'm on the board of the bid, perhaps I can take it back to them. Because I think this is a really good way of getting establishments established.
Thank you, Lisa. I really appreciate that. I mean, we have I have spoken to Worcestershire, so we'll put them in here without asking them first. But no, really would welcome that. Thank you. Yeah.
But I think it would really be really good, particularly new businesses as well.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a simple question. Why is it only a one-year extension we're considering?
Sorry, just to explain that better. So it's just a one-year extension on the existing terms and conditions. We have that budget still in the original allocation in reserves. So we don't need to ask for any more money from you or from council. It's already in reserves. What we'd like to do, just following on from what Lucy was saying, is look to work with partners to see if there's an expansion on the offer. So rather than the existing contract, look at whether there's additional work we might want to look at doing, which would require more money. So we need to come back to you to sort of say these are the options for as part of budget setting next year.
Thank you very much. And I'm pleased you've kind of managed to find the money for the balance of this for the next year. I must admit, I didn't know that that there was still money in the small projects fund. You know, I was there at the time. I do recall, and I'm really proud that in 2016-17, you know, we did set up the small projects fund, and this was one of the ideas that I put forward. So was, you know, really pleased with what it has achieved. So first question is there any more money of any kind left in that small projects fund? Have we?
Through you, Chair. So as I understand it, and finance officers told me, this was like the reserves from this particular budget allocation. So I think all the others have been spent. So
especially for access able. It's a proper use of it then, isn't it? I mean, and really interested in, you know, the level of access despite lockdown, and actually despite, to be honest, our failure to properly publicise it. I mean, I'm amazed that Visit Worcester, you know, have not been using it or publicising it, you know, which was all part of, you know, the original intentions of making the city as accessible as possible, you know, across all disabilities really, because the surveys are really comprehensive and are really, really good. And it is interesting to see which are the venues that are the popular ones, isn't it? And I was thinking, why not the other cinema? And that's because it hasn't got steps at the front, hasn't it? Whereas the Odeon's got steps at the front, so people look at, well, how can I get in there? Really good piece of work. Thank you. Really happy that, yeah, this continues and that we make more of it. And I mean, looking at the stats, you know, if the committee is happy to sign this off, and we're looking at, you know, a long-term contract, there's the potential for, you know, KPIs and actually to monitor the use of this going forward, and the number of venues and the level of access would be really good measures for this committee to continue to look at, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm going to reiterate what Lynn said. It's a very good report. Thank you very much. And obviously, I think a lot of credit on this has to go to Lynn, because she really has pushed for this since the creation of this committee and has been sort of the driving force behind Access Able. And I think it's a really, really important thing for the city and for our less able-bodied residents. One thing that I have picked up on, like Lynn, is that the fact that it's not promoted is a bit criminal almost, that people wouldn't know where to go and find this information. And I wonder if it's possible to add something to the recommendation so that we get good promotion of this service across City Council websites. Is that possible, Lloyd? Or Warwick?
Do you want me to take it away? Chair, you can either instruct us this evening and hold us to account on that instruction, or you can seek members' approval to add another recommendation. What I would bring members back to was the previous report on this item. There was a recommendation to that effect.
Okay.
It's just that we've not got there yet, and I think we wanted to bring this report first of all,
Right.
get us over the line for that year's extension, and then crack on with publicising it far better.
Okay, brilliant. In that case, I'm happy to go with that. So long as it is publicised properly at some point, because I think this is something that I hadn't heard of until we started this committee last year. I had no idea about it, and I'm assuming there's an awful lot of residents in Worcester that don't know about this, and visitors to the city that don't know about it, particularly if Visit Worcester isn't doing anything to promote it as well. So.
Yeah, just to say, we put that in there on purpose because to give us give the opportunity to tell us off really for not to make sure that we promote it better and make sure we're promoting it going forward. So and eyes wide open and bearing our ourselves our necks for punishment. So quite right, yeah, and already, as you can imagine, already with the Visit Worcester website in development and change going forwards, and what we'd like to do as a council on our pages, yeah, absolutely looking to promote it better.
Brilliant. Are we all happy to follow the recommendations in the report then? Yep. Fabulous. Okay. And then if we move on to agenda item 7, which is the health and wellbeing strategy consultation. Is that you, Lloyd?
Thank you, Chair. And if I may spend just a little bit of time on this one, if members will permit. So this report presents the draft health and wellbeing strategy that's currently out for consultation, covering the period 22 to 32. It was launched on the 7th of February of this year, and consultation closes on the 2nd of May, and the consultation document is included at Appendix 1. Most members will be aware that the Health and Wellbeing Board, which sits out of County Council, is statutorily obliged to periodically undertake a joint strategic needs assessment, and off the back of that then produce a health and wellbeing strategy. And members again will know that the Health and Wellbeing Board brings together a range of partners whose role it is to focus on health and wellbeing and reduce inequalities across the county. The current strategy covered the period 2016 to 2021, and it had three priorities which I've listed at paragraph 2.5. And the draft strategy currently out for consultation, that's going to look to cover a longer period, 2022 to 2032, for 10 years. Members will note the draft consultation has one single priority, and that's good mental health and wellbeing, but it's supported very clearly by wider determinants of health, 3 of those, that include healthy living at all ages, safe, thriving and healthy homes and communities and places, and quality local jobs and opportunities. And the document very clearly acknowledges that good mental health and wellbeing underpins most, if not all, other areas of our personal health. And just to say, it also gives a real sense about the impact that COVID-19 has had on mental health and wellbeing. Paragraph 211, just some of the key points of the strategy, the ones really pertinent to us. There's a general acknowledgement that the population of Worcestershire is healthy, but actually there are a smaller number of areas where people's health is not as good. It reinforces that prevention and early intervention are key areas of a strategy, and that's really important for us. That's where we can get involved. We don't treat, we try and solve, we try and prevent people from getting there in the first place to the services we deliver. It acknowledges that the system doesn't yet fully understand the impact of COVID. We know it's had an impact. We know some of the communities where it's impacted most, but there's still a lot more work to be done there. And it also obviously acknowledges that mental health is linked to the other areas of personal health that we all strive to do well in. In terms of the current conversations that we've had as officers and a brief conversation at leadership group, I just draw to your attention some of the emerging points. In my time in sort of the area of work that I've experienced, I've never seen a priority with a single. I've never seen a strategy with a single priority, and that could be considered unusual. and therefore it would be really important that the three sort of building blocks underneath the priority that they are focused on. Otherwise, trying to achieve that top level priority might mean that things get missed. I think it's really important to point out that we do have several areas within Worcester City that do suffer from above average levels of deprivation. And I think one of the things that we've certainly learned over the last 2 years, and Lisa mentioned this in her presentation, wouldn't it be a pity if this strategy doesn't utilise what I call the public health army that has been built up over the last 2 years. So that's not just people with white coats and stethoscopes around their necks. This is community groups, this is volunteers, this is all the people that have worked their socks off over the last 2 years to support neighbours and communities. We think the consultation enables us a real opportunity to talk about our work with our community engagement team and the asset-based community approach, and reinforce the role that we can play. And equally, much of the strategy and much of the intervention, I think, naturally sits within many of the services that we deliver. And I've mentioned a few there: housing, leisure, economic development, parks and open spaces, and obviously some of the regulatory functions as well. It talks about some illnesses and some ill health, but it's important to recognise that for some conditions, it knows no geographical boundaries. So independent living into later life, social isolation, dementia, that doesn't tend to be categorised by geography. That tends to affect many. And I think the last point, just around mental health, members will be acutely aware that many of the residents and businesses that we try and support, they are in crisis. And therefore we do see some of that really acute challenges that families and businesses face when we're trying to support them. So that gives a feel, I think, for where we as a district can contribute, can implement and sort of build on some of the services that we deliver, and obviously contribute to the consultation. Appendix 2 of the report includes the consultation questions, and we'll have an opportunity to explore those further. All members should now have the 7th of April in their calendars for an all-member briefing session. That'll be 5th of April, sorry, Chair, 5th of April. That will be supported by Matt Fung from the County Council. And then that links in with one of the recommendations, which is, because we don't have another committee before the 2nd of May, we will use that all-member session to try and develop a council response. And then this report seeks delegation to myself in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair to sign off on that draft response before we submit it. So I will stop there, Chair, and take any questions.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for the report. I think it's really important to point out that, it's good mental health and wellbeing is the key priority here, and I think officers are going to have their work cut out for them over the next few years, ensuring people have decent mental health and wellbeing, given the fairly unprecedented times that we're facing at the moment. Do you have any questions or comments on this? No? None at all? Come on, Jabba, you want to say something.
On a number of occasions this evening, the role of the community's engagement team and the ABCD agenda and how it all kind of fits in together. I mean, is there a danger of overburdening that team with all the responsibilities? What we're kind of highlighting, that at the moment they seem to be all things for all people, and that's the danger with trying to include asset-based community development and the community engagement thing. Are we overburdening them? Will they lose their focus and what they're supposed to be originally hired for doing?
Thank you, Chair, and Warwick can come in on the back of me. I think it's a really good question. I think we've acknowledged that the team needs to move into a new area. The team have been really good at doing a lot of things in the past. But as Warwick has spoken to you about many times, they're now moving into a different way of working, I suppose. And really, the success of that team and that type of work will be that they do less. Now, that sounds a bit odd. But if they're strengthening communities, getting communities to be more powerful, they can look after themselves better, then really that team has done its job. So absolutely they will be busy. There are so many challenges in so many different areas of work that's something for us to be able to manage internally. But the whole purpose of that team is to strengthen those communities, so there's a less need for them to look to public agencies, albeit I absolutely acknowledge there will always be some need for it. Do you want to come in on the back of me, Warwick?
Yeah, thank you. So there's in several district and county meetings recently, there's two elements to our engagement. One is asset-based community development, which is about the community identifying what they want to do, what's strong, what they want to enable and do in their communities. And so if 4 people in that community identify themselves as having diabetes and want to do something about it, the community development officer can help them do something about it and engage them with the right agencies and partners. And then my other reflection, so that's what we're doing at asset-based community, but it's basically enabling the community to do what they want to do and make things better for the community. At the same time, we're working with lots of partner agencies, and there's the element of, once we've built that trust with our communities, once we're working with our communities, we can help others come in and put something on in the local neighbourhood, and we can tell the community about it. So it's not just our officers doing everything. It's about that local intelligence and that building that trust in the community, so that you can open the door for better conversations going forwards. Hope that makes sense.
Just come on that. Yeah. I mean, I think the danger is that if something doesn't fit anywhere, then it gets dumped into that department. Oh, okay, you guys can, in the community engagement team, can look after it because it kind of doesn't fit anywhere else, and the burden then relies on that. I mean, I think there's a real danger here of overburdening that team, and it's losing its strategic focus. I mean, especially since we haven't had a full explanation of what a ABCD model kind of looks like and what it means for individual members and in their particular patches. Until that goes through, I know we're steaming ahead with it and selling it like from the top of the mountain. I think there's just a word of caution here, just to make sure that everybody understands what that is, and they have the proper support and resources in order for them to deliver what they're supposed to be delivering.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what's clear from that is that we're clear in the strategy that we're going to be developing around what ABCD means and what that's going to look like. So I think we do need to define that and make sure that it's clear to members what our intention is and where the remits do lie.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, a somewhat privileged position in having been, at a number of meetings of towards developing the draft strategy and representing the council or district councils at those meetings. And it wasn't coordinated, but I kind of agree with what Jabba is saying. And I think the really important thing that I would commend members to fully engage in this and to come along to the all-member session is that as district councils, what we do and our core services are absolutely fundamental to the environment in which people live, and that is what affects their mental health. ABCD is really good and, can deliver really positive things. It doesn't give people a decent home to live in or the right home to live in. And certainly in terms of my inbox, there are individuals whose mental health is suffering because they are not living in the appropriate accommodation that meets their needs. So I think it's important that, as a district council, we feed in to the strategy those things that we do. And it actually, is across all the committees of the council. It's not just for this particular room today.
I think I'm just going to echo really once again what Lynn's just said. It is really important that we have as many people as possible come along to this all-member session, because we as a district council have an absolute say in the type of social housing that people are living in. We have that ability to crack down on those rogue landlords who are allowing people to live in unsuitable accommodation that's unfit for habitation, that doesn't have appropriate energy performance certificates, where you've got people living in fuel poverty, where you've got children and families living in poverty. We have the ability to help with that, and that all contributes to mental health and well-being and good levels of mental health and well-being. And we can't form a correct response to this without the input of as many members as possible. So it's crucial that people attend this if they can. Lucy?
What is ABCD? I'm sorry. I've obviously lost something. Oh, well, can we just have a recap, please?
Just before I'll let Warwick answer, we are intending on bringing an introductory paper to Communities Committee in June on the subject. So we will have a full paper. We are conscious that we've had the benefit of sort of quite last minute funding from Public Health for us to be able to kickstart the journey into employing some community builders. And sort of changing our approach to working in line with ABCD. But I'll let Warwick answer the...
Be informed rather than, because I don't, for instance, sit on communities. So perhaps all members, perhaps a briefing to all members would be really useful.
Of course, Chair, we can do that.
Through you, Chair. So asset-based community development is what ABCD stands for. It's a theory developed in Americas in the 70s, I think, which is all about working with communities to identify what's strong in their community rather than what's wrong. And there's all sorts of tools and theories and logics behind it, but it's starting just on an open conversation about what's good about your community and what ties you together, what are the good selling points, and the way it develops from that is really when we've talked about mapping this evening quite a lot. So an asset isn't just something physical; it's a person, it's a bit of knowledge, it's a bit of a skill, and so part of the process is mapping those skills and assets, and then start linking the dots, because in every community you'll have someone who knows so much about their community and individuals within it. And it's about identifying those people, getting them animated, active within the community, and also linking those up with other community residents that also have that knowledge, and just starting to share that network and create that network for them to support and sustain themselves, really. So that's what it is in a nutshell. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned just which is mental health and landlords. Is there any particular sort of regulation on private landlords and housing associations with review to mental health that might be suffered as a result of other tenants, perhaps? I'm new to council, so I'm not sure if that's an existing thing, or should it perhaps be?
Not that I'm aware of, Chair. All our regulatory powers will relate to safety and welfare. There's probably a duty on social landlords in terms of vulnerability. They are a public agency at the end of the day, still in some form. So there may be something linked to vulnerability, but in terms of the private rented sector, our role is purely the enforcement of safety standards.
Recommendations in the report then? Yeah. Fabulous. And then I believe the last report is the committee performance scorecard.
I'll take this one as well, Chair. Just spend a couple of moments on it, if you don't mind. So this is the proposed scorecard for this committee for 22-23. This will be the first scorecard for this committee. We missed the deadline last year because the committee came into being following the annual election. And I suppose just a caveat, really, this doesn't need to be the scorecard for the remainder of time. This is a scorecard that can grow as the committee grows. But I am conscious that it's something that we've needed for some time. And then on the back of this, once we have a scorecard, we will then be able to develop a budget for this committee as well, given that we will have some key projects sat within it. So Appendix 1 is really where I draw your eyes to. And in respect to key projects and activities for next year, we're proposing 4. Members of this committee will have heard me talk about the integrated care system work, and conversations around the local arrangements for what that will look like are continuing. And again, we feel there's a role for this committee in keeping oversight of that and ensuring that Worcester City Council in particular has a key role in that. So we're recommending that supporting the implementation of local arrangements for the Worcester City Collaborative is included. We've also included a proposal for a project that will see the development of Worcester City health and wellbeing priorities, utilising the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment piece of work and public health profiles. We're conscious that at the moment we're proposing quite a light suite of KPIs. We think this project will help us deliver a far more relevant set of KPIs moving forward, but we need to do that bit of crunching work first to try and understand that better. With the town investment plan, we're recommending that each relevant committee takes its own sort of part of the plan that it relates to. And obviously, with the approval of the active travel officer recently, CLT felt that the active travel component of the TIP, the town investment plan, should sit with this committee. That seems a natural route to go down. And then lastly, the child poverty recommendations, which this committee are well aware of, progressing those recommendations. We're also proposing that sits with this committee as a key project as well. So shall I stop there first, Chair, and we'll talk about the projects and come back to performance indicators?
I think the one thing that I'm fairly cautious of is the active travel thing, because I think I've said it before and I'm going to say again. Towpaths are not cycle infrastructure, they're not adequate cycle infrastructure, and I think we need to be a bit more adventurous with active travel, but I know that a lot of that is not for us, it is for the county council who choose not to do anything about it. Could we possibly put on here, I don't know where we are with the hiring of an active travel officer, possibly something to do with that, about the recruitment process? Could that be form part of the scorecard or not, or do we foresee that person being recruited relatively quickly?
Yeah, that's in trail, Chair. They're just practical conversations that are ongoing. But I wouldn't see that as a key project. That's been a clear instruction from this committee.
So long as it gets hired.
So, yeah.
My worry is that it'll sort of disintegrate into nothing. Stephen?
A straightforward one. Yes, I like the. We've got new metrics that show increases in numbers and that, which is quite good in order to measure performance. But what would be very useful to know would be, for example, to know what the actual base of how many people would be likely to fall in these particular categories. So we actually have the percentage of the people who are disabled who are living independently as well, because what that would also show is a bigger proportion of that particular population that are actually getting it, rather than just the pure numbers. I think it would help. I know it's probably quite difficult to get the actual base number in that, but it would actually make the figures even more meaningful if that was accompanied as well.
Yeah, I think Councillor Hodgson has alluded to the fact that would be quite difficult to get our hands on in any short time scale. But absolutely, in terms of developing this suite of KPIs, that's absolutely something we could look at. And I know that's something that generally gets reported as part of the public health profile work and the Joint Strategic Needs Assessment work as well. Thank you, Chair. Chair, then coming to the key performance indicators, we discussed with Chair and Vice Chair the trickiness really in trying to come up with a suite of indicators that sit solely with this committee and that don't move this committee into scrutiny of other committees. This is a committee in its own right, and you can scrutinise any items that relate to your committee's remits. So what we've gone with are some indicators that don't sort of fall into the trap of sitting elsewhere within the council's governance system, but are standalone and we feel are relevant to this committee. So I'll just run through them very briefly. So the first one, increasing the number of disabled people enabled to live more independently through home adaptions. That's the work we do through our disabled facilities grants and our handyman scheme and our home repair scheme. The second one, obviously, when there were constitutional changes in respect to this committee, rough sleeping outreach now sits with this committee. So we've got two indicators there that nod towards that. The number of individual rough sleepers engaged with on an ongoing basis. So that's a sheer numbers point of view to see how many rough sleepers we're engaging with per quarter. But then I suppose the critical one for officers is the number of individual rough sleepers who, as a result of outreach, then transition into accommodation. So that's looking at the success of that outreach work. Again, over the last couple of committees, we've talked about the work that we've got involved with around the integrated care strategy work. Warwick and the team, the work they've done with COVID vaccination clinics being one example. Alan New's work with revitalising the leisure by prescription scheme. What we'd like to do for you as members is to report the number of projects that we're working on as part of that sort of wider health and wellbeing remit. So you can hold us to account on that one. And sorry, I've jumped the gun a bit. And the last one is actually looking at the number of exercise by prescription referrals through our leisure centres. And that nods back to the previous report, really, in showing that some of our services, that's how we contribute. You're missing a page, sorry. So, Chair, yeah, happy again, Chair, to stop taking questions.
Thanks. Any questions? Robin.
Thank you, Chair. I hear the concern about not wanting to look as if we're scrutinising other committees' work, but we have on PED a performance indicator that says how much is left in the DFG pot. Now, it would be useful to see that figure in here, because if there's no money left in the pot, we can't expect the number of people to be helped increase. That was my first question on that one. And the second one, we have been recipients of home adaptations through other organisations other than the city. So Help the Aged came and installed some stuff for us as well, or did some work for us as well. Will that kind of work activity be recorded in that KPI? That's the end of those two questions.
So if I take them backwards, Chair, the second question, that we would only be reporting on our City Council direct interventions. Okay. And the first one, Councillor Norfolk, you've thrown me. I don't know why DFGs would be reported through PED committee, so I can only take that one away.
Disabled facilities.
Having it. It wasn't in PED.
It was in communities, isn't it? In terms of communities, doesn't it?
It's overseen by Communities Committee in terms of the contract, but I can take that away if you want me to and sort of dig into that a bit just to clarify.
Please, I know I've seen it in one of the committees I sit on, and it's not scrutiny, it just helps inform the committee about why that particular activity may or may not be moving. That was the only point.
I can look into that.
Yeah, thanks. Just going back to that first one again, increase the number of disabled people enabled to live more independently through home adaptions. It's going to be a bit tricky trying to work out what more independently is. More than what? It's a little bit up in the air, I think. How are you going to get the sort of baseline from where we start?
So that's probably my poor wording, Councillor Mackay, but basically through our disabled facility grant application process, through our home adaptation scheme and through our handyman scheme. Anybody who applies into that and gets approved, that's what we will class as somebody being able to live more independently because they've had those adaptions implemented.
So really, anybody who has an adaptation, that will figure on the end of, so the rest of, yeah, I see what you're saying. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I've kind of given some more thought and kind of racked my brains, to be honest, following our sort of, the agenda setting meeting for the committee, and kind of looked back on the topics that actually we have discussed at this committee during its lifetime to date. So one that occurs to me, I'm looking at is about corporate parenting, because we had a really good kind of baseline report with that, and I think that's a topic that doesn't go elsewhere. So I think it would be good to have like an annual review and potentially, I don't know, a KPI in terms of, or to monitor, what we're offering, or the numbers of the level of access to what we're offering. I don't know, I'm throwing that at you. So that's...
Yeah, the difficulty is obviously as a service at county level, it's across the county. It's split up to individual districts. So our performance in any one year might not be as good as the previous year, but that's not to say the service isn't working well. It's flexed to where's the biggest demand. But yeah, I can go away and have a look if you like.
Surely a report or something rather than a KPI then? Annual report?
Yeah, but to put it in context, I think you'd need to say, well, that's what we did last year. This is what we've done this year. And all I'm saying is that's not the sole determinant. It's all the other districts and what they're doing.
Yeah, but an annual report. Sure.
I mean, at district level, there is data on the numbers of looked after children who live within Worcester City. Yeah, so, you could look at what percentage of those are accessing the leisure offer, or the families are accessing the leisure offer. So it's something that needs some consideration, and it is about what we deliver as a city council, which was the value of the report that we had last year. So if I can kind of put that one on the radar for consideration. And then I had a look at the measures that are on the back of the new refreshed Worcester City plan. So there are some measures there which presumably the council is measuring or is proposing to measure that I don't think belong to other committees. I mean, I haven't researched that, but the ones that occur to me that are relevant to here, food bank attendance. It says number of attendances at Worcester Food Bank, fuel poverty, proportion of households that experience fuel poverty. Then there's a couple around obesity, NHS admissions for obesity and obesity levels in year 6. And then the one about life expectancy. I mean, clearly those latter ones are only going to be like an annual measure and would come out from public health, but this would be where we would look at them potentially.
Chair, just to say, I'm looking at the final page of the city plan now, and there are certainly some indicators there that would lend itself to sitting with this committee. So no problem, in having further conversations about that if members are minded to. Councillor Denham's absolutely right. Some of those are longer term than a quarterly report. And I suppose just to come back, not challenging Councillor Denham's point, but just to come back to the second project really, which was around developing Worcester City health and wellbeing priorities. I think that project is trying to get into some of this and trying to provide us with a suite of KPIs moving forward. But there are certainly some in there that we could simply, copy and paste into our scorecard at this moment in time. Perhaps some of the longer term ones we could do is giving it a bit more thought to make sure we get them right.
Well, I think if nobody has any more questions, are we happy to note the report? Yep. Not for noting this one, is it? Yep, we're happy to go along. Are we happy to approve the recommendations? Yep. Fabulous. Right, I do believe we've got 2 items of AOB this evening. Karen, you've got one, haven't you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I met with the Worcester City Football Club here last Thursday. I remember Lucy and Stephen were there as well, and it was really nice to see them, but I hadn't realised quite how much effort they were making out into the community. They were doing the sort of obvious things you'd expect, like youth groups, but they were considering mental health, obesity in the community within their own supporters, and how they could work with Dementia and Age UK to operate a buddy system so that people could bring dementia sufferers to football matches, giving their family a much needed break, and the sufferers themselves that wonderful experience that they had possibly enjoyed before they were struck down with dementia. And so I thought it was a lovely idea, and very much sat with this committee, and having had the notice that they are not on Access Able, and I think that's possibly something they need to be looking at, so I'm going to suggest that to them. But I spoke to the youth football team guy, and he said he'd be quite happy to come in and speak about it to the committee once he's got a little bit more about it going, and I thought that might be something that would be nice to hear from an active community group.
It was something like
And they were also concentrating on a holistic approach, and it was good health, and better diet, and all sorts of a whole, particularly difficult to get men to address their mental health and their health habits. And encouraging them to seek medical help as well, which was amazing, really.
He's always welcome to come and use public participation. I think, do we have the chair of the Supporters Trust in the room as well? Is that right? No? Are you not anymore?
I can help relay that.
Yes. We've put you on the spot there, Julian, I'm sorry. He's nodding off in the corner. But he's always welcome to come and use public participation. But I think, did you want to see a report come to committee? Is that one of your original requests from your email?
Yes, it would be if they could come and present at committee as the progress that they've made. I thought it would be really useful as a sort of study group, because they're embarking on this, having recently returned to the city. Do you think, Lucy? Yeah.
Chair, I think your advice, if somebody wants to come along and talk about the work that they've carried out, then I think public participation is the right spot for that. But yeah.
I did, but I hadn't told you. What did you think I wanted to say?
You mentioned to me more this evening about the 2 items that you had email conversation about. That one.
Sorry. Yeah, there were some other topics that officers didn't have time to prepare a report for today. So, I mean, there was reference to the household support fund and the fuel poverty. I think it's a really important topic and relevant to the child poverty task and finish. And I'm not sure that as councillors, as to exactly how those schemes are working and whether there is ongoing support. So there obviously isn't time to get something done at present, but I think possibly if it's possible, maybe to have a briefing on some of that detail and then look at, you know, a future report in due course. But with the cost of living crisis and the level of concern, it will be good to have for members to be armed with a better understanding of what government systems are in place or are not.
Yeah, Chair, just on the back of Councillor Denham's friendly reminder, we've started to pull some information together. Today, but I think it'd probably be inappropriate for me to run through it all now, and it probably would be a little bit pepper potted. So more than happy to put an all-member briefing all together to remind members about the welfare support that the council provides from its own budgets. Some of the monies that we've had in from partner agencies that have helped us as well, but also the investment being put in by the government as well in terms of supporting vulnerable residents as well. So I'm sure we can pull that together within the space of a couple of weeks.
Fabulous. Well, I think if that's it, then we're all done. Oh, sorry, you've got another one.
I've also got the any other business that I didn't tell you about. Since this is the last Health and Wellbeing Committee prior to the local elections, and I understand our chair is standing down, I would like to kind of put on formal record and minute note her thanks for getting this committee off the ground. It is a new committee and we've been, you know, we've all been finding our way with it. So, yeah, thank you to Councillor Griffiths for getting us going.
Thank you, and thank you to you for accepting my invitation to put yourself forward to be Vice Chair. So it's been good this past year getting stuff going. I'm very pleased that we've had child poverty high on the agenda and active travel. And a big thanks to Warwick and Lloyd and Sue for all your support and preparing some great reports for us. And Warwick, I think you probably need a bit of a holiday, to be honest.
Steady, Chair. Office advantage officers.
I'm sorry. A few weeks ago, I drove into Worcester and it was 7 o'clock in the morning, 7:15, and he was loitering along by the Knife Angel. And I thought, does this man never go home and sleep? So he was there on Saturday as well. Right. You need a break, Warwick. So yeah, thank you very much to everybody, and you know, it's been fun, and I think we've done some good stuff this year. So.